Imagine the world's most beloved talk show host sitting across from the man who redefined the outlaw spirit in music. Everyone expected a heartwarming story of redemption, but instead, they witnessed a total collapse of the Hollywood facade. Before we dive into the wreckage of this viral moment, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. Because what happened between Kelly Clarkson and Jelly Roll wasn't just a disagreement. It was a revolution on live television. The atmosphere in the studio was electric, but underneath the cheers there was a strange, heavy stillness. Kelly Clarkson, America's sweetheart, sat in her usual chair, her face lit with that famous, welcoming glow. Opposite her was Jelly Roll, the man whose tattoos tell a story of a life spent in the trenches of addiction and incarceration. The audience was primed for a tissue moment, the kind where a celebrity shares a struggle, everyone cries, and we all feel better about ourselves before the first commercial break. Kelly leaned in, her voice brimming with that genuine warmth she's known for. "Jelly, I have to be honest," she began. "Your journey is it's a miracle. To go from a jail cell to sold-out arenas, winning awards and becoming a household name. It is the definition of a comeback story. You're proof that anyone can turn their life around." The audience erupted in applause, but Jelly Roll didn't smile. He didn't give the humble nod the producers expected. He shifted in his seat, his eyes scanning the bright studio lights as if seeing them for the first time. "I hear that word a lot, Kelly," he said, his voice gravelly and low. "Comeback. But a comeback implies you were once on top and fell. When I was in those cells, I wasn't somewhere else. I was nowhere. I was a ghost. And honestly, I'm starting to wonder if I ever really left that ghost behind, or if I'm just wearing a more expensive suit today." The smile on Kelly's face didn't disappear, but it wavered, a tiny crack in the professional armor that hinted at the storm to come. The audience went from cheering to a deafening silence in seconds. Jelly Roll wasn't following the script, and the producers behind the scenes were already sweating. He wasn't just talking about his past. He was attacking the very idea of why he was invited to the show in the first place. Kelly, ever the professional, tried to steer the ship back to safety. "But that's exactly why people love you, Jelly. You're honest. You're real. You've struggled with things most people are too afraid to even mention, and now you're a light for millions of people. Doesn't that feel incredible, to know your pain has a purpose?" Jelly Roll let out a short, dry laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "A purpose or a price tag, Kelly?" He leaned forward, his tattooed hands clasped tightly. "I look around this room at all these cameras, the makeup artists, the lights, and I realize that for the last 3 years, I haven't been a musician. I've been a professional victim. I'm asked to walk onto these stages and perform my trauma so people can feel a 5-minute rush of inspiration while they're folding their laundry. I'm selling my darkest nights to keep the machine running, and I've gotta ask, what is it doing to my soul to keep digging up those graves for the sake of ratings?" The tension in the room became a physical weight. Kelly's posture stiffened. She wasn't used to guests questioning the why of the show. "I think that's a very dark way to look at a beautiful thing," she countered, her voice gaining a defensive edge. "People connect with you because they're hurting, too. When they see you made it, it gives them permission to keep going. That's not selling trauma, that's healing." "Is it, though?" Jelly Roll challenged, his voice rising. "Or does it just make them feel good for a second until they realize their life is still a mess and I'm just another guy getting rich off a sad story? I'm out here re-traumatizing myself every single day because struggle is what sells. If I woke up happy tomorrow and didn't have a tragedy to talk about, would I even have a career anymore?" This was no longer a talk show. It was a confrontation between two different worlds. On one side, a woman who built a billion-dollar brand on being relatable. On the other, a man who felt like his very identity was being swallowed by that same brand. And then Kelly did something no one expected. She made it personal. Kelly's face flushed. The host mask was slipping, revealing the woman underneath who had dealt with her own share of public scrutiny. "I think you're being incredibly unfair to me and to everyone who works on this show," she said, her voice tightening. "I've been open about everything. I've talked about my divorce, the pain of my childhood, the way the media treats my weight, my mental health. I don't do that for ratings, Jelly. I do it because I believe that vulnerability is the only way we actually connect as humans. You act like you're the only one who's ever felt exposed." Jelly Roll looked at her, and for a moment there was a flicker of pity in his eyes. "Kelly, with all the respect in the world, your divorce from a millionaire music executive while you sit in a multi-million-dollar studio is not the same thing as the trauma I'm talking about. My vulnerability involves the years I spent behind glass watching my kids grow up in a Polaroid picture. It involves the people I hurt when I was selling drugs just to eat. My pain isn't relatable, it's devastating. And when we try to put it in the same box as a celebrity breakup just to make it good TV, we're lying to the audience. The gasp from the audience was audible. It was a direct hit. Kelly stood up, her microphone cable jerking behind her. "So my pain doesn't count because I have money?" she demanded. "Because I've been successful, I'm not allowed to feel broken. That is incredibly judgmental. You come into my house on my show and tell me my life is just curated empathy." The fire in her eyes was real now. No teleprompter, no rehearsed lines. Just two people standing on the edge of a total breakdown. We've all seen awkward celebrity interviews, but this was different. This was a demolition of the daytime TV myth. Kelly Clarkson was no longer the host. She was a participant in a battle for the truth. And the word jelly roll used next would change the course of her career forever. "I'm not saying your pain doesn't count, Kelly," Jelly Roll said, standing up to meet her gaze. "I'm saying your pain is part of your brand. You're the resilient woman. That's the product you sell. And I'm the redeemed outlaw. But what happens to us when we're tired of being those things? What happens when I don't want to be fixed today? What happens when I'm still a mess, but the cameras are rolling and I have to pretend I've got it all figured out so you can sell laundry detergent during the break?" "Stop it," Kelly snapped. "This isn't just about selling things. We are helping people." "Are we?" Jelly Roll stepped closer. "Or are we just creating content? That's what they call it in the meetings, right? Good content. My life, my addiction, your heartbreak, your kids' privacy, it's all just fuel for the machine. We've turned our souls into a commodity, and we're sitting here pretending it's a ministry. I'm tired of the lie, Kelly. I'm tired of performing my redemption." The word content seemed to physically strike Kelly. She looked around at the cameras, the lenses that had been her constant companions since she was 20 years old, and for the first time she looked horrified. Her eyes narrowed, and a coldness took over her expression. "I think you should leave," she whispered, though the microphone caught it clearly. "If you think so little of what we do here, if you think my life and my work are just content, then why are you even standing on this stage?" The audience was frozen. The producers were frantically signaling for a commercial break, but the cameramen were too mesmerized to look away. This was the realest moment in the history of the show, and it was about to get much, much worse. Most shows would have cut to a pharmacy commercial the second things got uncomfortable. But Kelly Clarkson did the unthinkable. She looked her producer in the eye, ignored the wrap-it-up signals, and sat back down. The mask was off, and for the first time in daytime history, the audience was about to see what happens when the queen of relatability decides to stop being polite and start being real. The silence in the studio was so heavy you could almost hear the hum of the cooling fans in the rafters. Kelly's eyes were bright with a mixture of fury and realization. "No," she said, her voice steadying into something far more dangerous than her usual warmth. "We aren't taking a break. You wanted to talk about the machine, Jelly. Let's talk about it. You say people only want you when you're crawling out of the dark. You think your value disappears the moment you're actually okay. But isn't that just your own fear talking? Isn't it easier to blame the audience than to admit you're terrified of being happy?" Jelly Roll sank back into his chair, his expression unreadable. He hadn't expected her to bite back with such precision. "Maybe it is fear, Kelly," he admitted, his voice dropping an octave. "But it's a fear built on evidence. I see how the world works. People don't want a healthy, boring guy. They want the before and after foe. They want the struggle because it makes them feel superior for 5 minutes. If I'm just a guy who's doing well, I'm not a story anymore. I'm just another person they can ignore." Kelly shook her head, leaning forward until she was nearly in his personal space. "That is so incredibly cynical. You're telling me that my best friend, who used your music to stay sober during her darkest nights, was just consuming content. You're saying her healing is a lie because you feel like a commodity. That's not just an insult to this show, Jelly. That's an insult to the very people who saved your life by listening." The debate was no longer about music or fame. It was about the very soul of entertainment. Jelly Roll was about to ask Kelly a question that would stop her heart, a question that challenged the very brand she had spent 20 years building. "You talk about honesty, Kelly," Jelly Roll began, his voice quieter now but cutting through the air like a knife. "But let's talk about your brand. You're the world's best friend. You're the one who's always resilient, always coming out on top, always finding the silver lining. But let me ask you something. When's the last time you were allowed to be just plain angry? Not sad, not vulnerable, but furious. When's the last time you told this audience, "I'm not okay, I don't forgive, and I'm tired of pretending everything happens for a reason"? Kelly opened her mouth to respond, but the words died in her throat. The studio audience, which usually cheered at every beat, was paralyzed. They were watching a professional communicator lose her ability to speak. Jelly Roll continued, "You can't, because Angry Kelly doesn't sell talk shows. Unforgiving Kelly doesn't get the cover of magazines. You're trapped in the Triumph brand just as much as I'm trapped in the Struggle brand. We're both just different flavors of the same lie." The color drained from Kelly's face. The reality of his words hit her with the force of a physical blow. She had built an empire on authenticity, but she realized in that moment that it was an authenticity with boundaries. She was allowed to cry, but only if she wiped the tears away by the end of the segment. She was allowed to be hurt, but only if she promised the audience she was stronger for it. He had exposed the cage she didn't even realize she was living in. The tension had reached a boiling point where there was no going back. The audience wasn't just watching a celebrity interview. They were watching two people realize they had become living billboards for their own pain. And then the tears finally came, but they weren't the pretty TV tears we're used to. "You think I don't know that?" Kelly's voice finally returned, but it was trembling, raw, and stripped of all its professional polish. "You think I don't wake up every day and wonder if anyone actually sees me, or if they just see the Kelly they've projected their own hopes onto? I've turned my entire life into a product. My divorce, my childhood, my kids. It's all been processed, packaged, and sold. I'm sitting here in a multi-million-dollar studio, and I feel like I'm living in a glass box." She wiped her eyes, smearing her makeup, not caring how she looked on the high-definition monitors. "I'm tired too, Jelly. I'm tired of being the girl next door who always figures it out. I'm tired of having my healing used as a template for other people's lives. You're mad because you feel like a story, but at least your story is your own. I feel like my story belongs to everyone but me." Jelly Roll looked at her, and the anger that had fueled his earlier words vanished. For the first time, he saw her not as a host or a representative of the machine, but as a fellow prisoner of the same system. "Then why do we keep doing it?" he asked, his voice filled with a genuine, heartbreaking curiosity. "If it's this heavy, if it's this hollow, why are we still standing here under these lights?" The million-dollar question was hanging in the air. Why do we keep doing this? The answer Kelly gave was perhaps the most devastating thing ever uttered on daytime television. It wasn't an answer of hope, it was an answer of survival. "Because what else is there?" Kelly whispered. The microphone caught the crack in her voice, broadcasting her despair to millions. "We've gone too far. We've traded our privacy and our peace for the ability to connect. And maybe that connection is the only thing that makes the pain worth it. Maybe keeping someone company in their darkness is better than being alone in our own, even if it doesn't actually fix anything." Jelly Roll shook his head slowly. "I used to believe that. I used to think that if I just shared enough, if I was real enough, I'd finally feel whole. But all it's done is make me feel like I'm performing survival instead of actually living. I don't want to keep people company in their pain if it means I have to stay in mine forever just to be relatable. That's not a career, Kelly. That's a life sentence." The audience was beginning to realize that they were the third party in this toxic relationship. They were the ones consuming the pain, the ones demanding the inspiration. A woman in the front row began to sob, and for the first time, neither Kelly nor the cameras moved to comfort her. They were too busy staring into the abyss of their own careers. The heartwarming episode had officially become a eulogy for the industry itself. Every great drama has a moment where the lead character realizes they can't go back to the way things were. For Jelly Roll, that moment was now. He didn't wait for the cameras to stop or the producer to give him permission. He made a choice that would send shockwaves through the music industry. "I can't do this anymore, Kelly," Jelly Roll said, standing up. He wasn't aggressive this time, he was just finished. "I'm going home. And I don't mean I'm going back to the hotel. I mean I'm going to go find out who I am when I'm not Jelly Roll. I'm going to find out if I'm even a person anymore without the tattoos and the tragedy and the songs about jail." Kelly looked up at him, her face a mask of grief. "You're really walking away, just like that? You're going to leave everything you've built?" "I'm not leaving what I built," he replied, looking back at her from the edge of the stage. "I'm leaving the cage I built around myself. And for what it's worth, Kelly, I think you're the bravest person I've ever met. Not because of what you've been through, but because you've survived this machine for this long. I just hope you find a way to be yourself before you forget who she was." And with that, he walked into the wings. No music played, No audience members cheered. There was only the sound of his boots on the stage, fading into silence. With Jelly Roll gone, Kelly Clarkson was left alone on her own stage. The cameras were still rolling, the lights were still blazing, and the audience was waiting for her to save the moment, to give them that one final Kelly smile that would make everything okay. But that smile never came. Kelly stood there for a long time, looking at the empty chair across from her. She looked at the cameras, then at her own hands, which were shaking visibly. "He's right," she said to the silent room. "He's absolutely right. I don't know who I am when the cameras aren't on. I've spent 20 years being the person you needed me to be, and I've forgotten how to be the person I need me to be." She reached up and unclipped her microphone. The small thud as she set it on the table echoed like a gunshot. "I think I need to find her," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "And I don't think I can find her here. I'm done. I'm just done." Without another word, Kelly Clarkson walked off the stage, leaving behind her show, her brand, and a studio full of people who had just witnessed the most honest moment in the history of television. The screen cut to black, leaving millions of viewers staring at their own reflections. It was the day the music stopped, the day the inspiration ended, and the day two of the world's biggest stars decided that their souls were no longer for sale. What do you think? Was this the end of an era or just the beginning of their real lives? Drop a comment below and let us know if you think they made the right call.